Hello and welcome back to the Leadership in the Dealership podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Keishawn Batts, and today I am joined by one of our illustrious guests, a dear friend of mine, a man I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage with a time in the past, Mike Anderson, President and CEO of the Rikess Group. Mike, welcome to the podcast today. How are you?
I'm good, Keishawn. Thank you. It's, every time I get to see you, you just get better looking over and over again. What's going on with it?
I appreciate that, man. I like to think of myself as some fancy bottle of wine out of Charlotte, North Carolina that just gets better with age. So I'm glad to have you today. As always, it's always a pleasure. Want to have a little bit of fun today in our time together and really get to understand your expertise and your passion for the business. One of the things I'd really like to just start off with is something fun, Mike. And I'm an avid car guy. I've been in the car business pretty much my whole life, but I always have like my dream car. And my dream car, as I've shared on this podcast in the past, is a Porsche 911, lime green with black race stripes. So I'd ask you, Mike, if money were no option and it didn't matter whether it was EV or ICE, what would be your car that you would drive until the wheels fell off?
It's really crazy because I've been doing this now for 36 years. And this is going to sound crazy, but I don't care about cars.
Really?
I have a 2021 Toyota Tundra SR5, and I'm fat and happy in my truck. That's good for me.
Well, I'll take it, man. Again, it's fun for me because I'm always interested in like the cars people dream about or like the stories behind them. I used to ask like, what was your most memorable experience with a car that people have had? So that's interesting, man, and exciting to hear about you. Like the cars really don't matter a lot. Obviously, my dream car is probably out in the future for me, but I drive it in my video game pass.
There you go. Well, I have to tell you that I have a client. If I'm actually at their store now. If you're a Porsche fan, you would drool all over this car. It's a Gulf-colored Porsche. He had it custom painted, blue and orange. It's a wild.
Yeah, you'll have to send me a picture of that. I'm an avid Porsche guy. I tell this story as well, Mike, but you don't know. My first job was actually washing cars at a Porsche dealership in Richmond, Virginia. So I've come a long way. Porsches have a distinct smell, and I still have a small spot in my heart for me. So
there you go.
Well, let's get kick started. I think one of the things I'm always interested in sharing with our audience is like, Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background. You mentioned how many decades you've been a part of the industry, and just give me that history and how you got started in auto.
Okay, so I'll do it as quickly as I possibly can. I was working for a company that many, many people listening to this podcast won't even know existed, but it was called Tom McCann's Shoe Company. And I was managing a store. I was way too young to be managing a store, but I was doing it. And I had this wonderful part-time person, Madeline Ginsberg. And every day at noon, right on a dot, her husband would stop by. It was a plaza store. He'd open the door and he would say, Madeline, it's time to go to lunch. And they would leave. Well, after a few months, he started opening the door, and instead of saying, Madeline, let's go to lunch, he'd open the door and say, Michael, you're wasting your time. Come see me. So I ended up going there for an interview. It was in the center of Hartford, Connecticut. It was a Littman AMC Chevrolet. So that tells you about how long it's been. And so long story short, he convinced me to get into the car business. I didn't go to work there for logistical reasons more than anything else. But I started at a place called Gale Toyota Enfield, Connecticut, and honestly, I never looked back. I really have short of leadership and the things we talk about in the sales process, I have a fondness for the used car side of the business. I think it's the bloodline of a well-run organization. But it's been a wonderful career. I couldn't possibly recommend it highly enough for anyone to get into this industry. It's a remarkable industry with remarkable people that I just feel completely blessed with some of the relationships that I've developed over the years. It's a wild and fun ride.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've always told my family like the auto industry is a community, and it's just a community that embraces you so quickly. And oftentimes when you meet somebody that's in the car industry, they're always wondering like where have you been? What dealerships have you worked for? How long have you been in? Not that tells you like whether the person is great at their job or not, but it really tells you about the community in the ways that people can empathize with one another on their journey and find areas to relate. So many people might not know this about you as well, but I know you're super passionate about this industry, just as I am myself. And I'd really like if maybe you could spend a few moments and tell us about the Rikess Group and its mission. Like, what gets you really excited about the mission you and your team are out to strive for in the auto industry?
So it's morphed over the years. I was associated with the Rikess Group in 1989 and was faced with a situation. I was a general manager of two smaller stores in Western Massachusetts, and there were two things going on. One, I really took disdain to the way that people perceived the auto industry, consumers perceived the auto industry, and I also didn't like it on the flip side. I don't, by the way, just for the record, I don't think gross is a dirty word. I think how you obtain it could be a dirty word. And it always bothered me to walk around the showroom and high five people after we ripped somebody's head off, the old verbiage, right? So it bothered me. So I wanted to try to change that. And then secondly, the company had acquired a Ford store that had a really bad reputation. The company I was working for at the time had a great reputation, but we had some heavy lifting due to turn this Ford store around. And across the river in that area was a behemoth Ford store. And to give you a quick example of what I mean, if we had 3 Ford F-250 plow trucks in the wintertime, my competitor had 150. So we were just like, forget about it. It was nothing, right? So I knew that the marketing message was going to have to be different. And that's when, partially, but for the most part, that's when I really started to embrace negotiation-free selling. And fortunately for me, the dealer believed in me enough, and I met Mark Rikess, and we started talking back and forth. And long story short, we were one of the earliest adopters of negotiation-free selling, and that was the catalyst for what you just asked me about or suggested was the mission. Now, obviously, the mission has morphed over 30 years or since 1989. I do believe I'm convicted to the negotiation-free sales process, but today that's the core. It has to be wrapped in a complete digital retail environment to be successful and to capitalize on that success, meaning maximizing your opportunities. So today, negotiation-free selling is just an element or a portion of making the car purchase transaction so simple that it's almost impossible to not purchase a vehicle from a dealer that would embrace those ideas and those principles.
Yeah, for sure. And Mike, as you think about like you being an advocate for single point of contacts and the digital retail space, like as you think about maybe some of the groups you work with today or groups that you've worked with in the past, like talk to us about like the main challenges dealers typically face when transitioning from a less than digital experience to a digitally enabled retail model. Like what are the big pain points in that change management process?
Yeah, really good question. So it's an F word. I hope it's okay to use it. It's called fear, right?
A four-letter
So
F word too.
the 4-letter F word. So it's typically fear. And you and I start off by talking about how wonderful this industry is. And I would say to you that for all of its advantages and benefits, I can't believe that in the second half of 2024, we're still discussing or deciding whether or not dealers should embrace digital retail. It's a shock to me. And it's driven by, I think, just an opinion, right? I'm not telling you I'm correct. But I think it's driven by two things. One is fear of change, fear of risk, just fear in general, which is applicable. The second thing is not very attractive, and it is a reluctance for leaders in the auto industry, meaning at the store level and OEMs, but we're going to stick on the dealership side because that's where your question was today, to embrace change. And candidly, because I have been, if I was a dealer principal or a general manager and my team was afraid of change, the first change coming would be they would be terminated, right? Because that without change, it's obvious you said, I just can't believe we still have a reluctance to embrace the way the consumer wants to consume. It is staggering to me. I have a dear friend, wants to buy a car for his daughter, calls me out of total frustration. Why is it that these dealers still want me to come into the dealership? Why is it that when I want a best price for a transaction, I keep hearing, well, if you come in and meet my handsome sales manager, I mean, it's silly, is it not? I mean, we consume food, we consume. We could use Amazon, right? But it's so blatantly obvious. I go to a local grocery store. I live in Georgia. I go to a Kroger or a Publix. A third of the parking lot's gone now because it's loaded up with people just stopping by and having carts brought out to their car. I mean, this may be a ridiculous statement, but I would trust buying a car remotely better than having someone pick my vegetables. So,
yeah, it's fair.
right? I mean, you said you wanted to have a little bit of fun. I find it kind of fun. It's okay to buy a box of macaroni, I guess, but if I'm going to pick out meats or things like, I want to do that. It's easy. A car is just a car or an automobile for the most part. I mean, obviously there's times where, and I'm not suggesting you wouldn't get this kind of guidance remotely, but there's times where you really need a lot of information. If you're buying a commercial vehicle or something. But for the vast majority of transactions that take place in the auto industry space and the dealership space, it's a commodity. So a lot of dealers say, and I think this is probably relevant, a lot of dealers are concerned about the risks around retailing virtually. And we've got evidence, and it's obvious to me, or something becomes obvious to me. And the answer is, how do you transact remotely successfully? So I happen to be at Lexus of Lehigh Valley today. I'm leaving this afternoon. They just drove a car from Allentown, Pennsylvania to West Virginia for delivery. So the first thing is, drop the walls, stop thinking about your market from local, and embrace knowing that you can deliver vehicles. And by the way, this happened to be a pre-owned car. So if you're talking about risk, a pre-owned car, the risk is much higher than it is on a new car, right? So what's my point? One of the catalysts that makes it successful is take the risk out of the transaction, right? So if you go online to Home Depot, Walmart, and it doesn't matter where, Amazon, whatever the case is, if you don't like what you consume, what do? You return it, right? So if you can increase your sales exponentially, would you buy one or two cars back a month to do that if you could pick up 50 or 60 or 80? Take the risk out of the transaction for the consumer. I think that's a big miss for a lot of dealers. They're really reluctant to buy a car back if it's a problem.
Yeah, no, I think that is still, to your point, a fear in a lot of this space today is that lost sale. I can't return that car. I lost a sale. I got to take one off the board, but don't think of the unintended consequences of not having that be available or potentially just that risk mitigation. So, you mentioned if you had a team that was unwilling to transform digitally, like the first change you make is their employment. But like, let's say you got a bunch of folks that are bought on board. We've seen the demographics within the industry change a bit over the last 10 to 15 years, but you've got a more tech-driven team, more tech-leaning team that wants digital retailing, but never have really experienced it before. Like, talk to me how you think about training those individuals and retaining them, right? Because I think a lot of people that are in the auto space today are new in the auto space, haven't been there before. I talked with many dealers that have different ways that they recruit talent and things of that nature. But talk to me how you can, like, take advantage of this technology in training and retention?
Boy, great question. And I think there's something that gets missed frequently when you're looking to make wholesale change in an environment. And the first thing, and unfortunately, I think just tongue in cheek, but sometimes leadership has this wonderful idea, really good ideas, and they start acting on them without really doing two things. One, sharing the vision and having a really, really clear, definitive vision that gets shared across the board so that everyone can see what the outcome is going to be. That needs to be the first thing. We don't start working on it until we know exactly where we're headed, right? Where's the beach? Put the sails up, drop the rudder, but we're going this way, and that's all we're going to, we're going to, and by the way, when we get to the beach, we're going to burn the boat because we're there, right? So what I would say is sharing the vision is number one. Secondly, it requires patience. You can't flip the switch when you're making massive cultural change or changes in it doesn't matter if it's in the dealership or any other business. So it requires patience. The next thing I believe is critically important is when you think about bringing people on board, make sure that you're hiring the person to fit the desired outcome. So one of the things we focus a lot on with my clients is really extensive interview processes to make sure the people that are coming on board fit not only the culture of the company and the business of the company, but also the vision of where it's going to go. And then it comes down to three things. Always first, human capital, people. Second thing is process. Third thing is technology. And embracing all three of them, making sure that they're working together. I'd like to see better integrations in the auto industry. We're going to see that as time moves along. I'm not giving anybody a plug here, but I think that Techion's made a profound change in the auto industry when it comes to integrations and better technology. So, but those are, I think, are the three key elements to making it work. And then being convicted to it. Train it, speak about it all the time, celebrate successes. I think we miss those opportunities frequently. And stick to the vision, right?
I agree 100%. And thank you for your openness there. I'm going to ask you a really tough question now that might be a little provocative. I think, we're in political season, and depending on like which dealer you talk to, right? You think of where the future is headed. I think it's very two-sided in what the future looks like. I believe consumers will demand an experience that's much akin to what you mentioned, right? Like the Instacarts, the Amazons, even the Apples of the world. I'm not sure anyone convinced me why I can't have the technology to buy a car in the same way I buy my iPhone every 2 years. And I think there are some that believe that is the future. There are others that believe, man, the auto industry is the auto industry. It's always been this way. It's always going to be this way. We've overcome disruptions from every part of the world, and it's been this way forever. It's going to stay this way. Like, where do you side in the traditional or more evolutionary view of the future of auto?
Wow, what a question. Thanks for that. So disruption. I don't perceive consumers' preferences as disruption. I think all we're trying to do is meet their expectations, right? So we meaning the Rikess Group, are blessed with some really great clients that embrace these ideas that you're talking about. It's ironic that we're having this call today because I'm sitting at Lexus of Lehigh Valley, and we have taken a few minutes of a pause this morning to celebrate the 19th month in a row, best month over month over month. That's not an accident. That's a strategy, right? And candidly, the Upstart tool, this store has been using Upstart since Prodigy, and it is a key catalyst to the success of the vision of this store. So in a broader sense, what I would say to you is there are disruptors in the auto industry. I'm not suggesting there isn't. I think Amazon has the potential to be a disruptor with their model. But if they are, I think what we have to do in the auto industry at the dealership level is step back enough to say, do I need to pay attention to that? Why would someone be successful at something that I can do myself? Right? So we use this store or a large dealer group in the Midwest, another one in Denver right now that is embracing a digital retail strategy, all based around an idea, which is essentially, why would you ever want to come to the store? We just want to transact wherever you want to transact, and we're going to present you with the appropriate tools, people, processes to make sure that we can do that. So because I have a steeped relationship here, it's exciting to share that this store has gone from being the 7th highest volume store in Pennsylvania, Lexus store in Pennsylvania, to the number 1 in Pennsylvania, and now the 52nd largest volume new car store in the country. Now, 52 is a long ways away, but it is Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's not Brooklyn. It's not Los Angeles. It's not Sandy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
And, for a store to move from 1 to 1.1% market share to over 3, that didn't happen by accident. And I know the reason that and this store is not the only successful one. I gave you ideas of other clients are getting the same results by just giving the consumer what they're looking for, which is an easy transaction. And by the way, I'm not going to sit here for a second and say people are going to buy cars online. I don't care if they buy a car online. I want them to go as far through the transaction as they choose, then contact the store, buy the car online, ask for I don't care what they want to do. I just want them to do what they want to do, right? So this, we've had this conversation before. The catalyst for us with Prodigy, coming off of a competitor, going to Upstart, the theory was to give the consumer the exact same experience in store that they had sitting on their sofa at home. Had to be identical. And I know this sounds like a commercial for Upstart. I could probably be charged of being guilty of it, but it's the only tool in the marketplace that provides that capability. That's all there is to it. So to answer your question, I think we've got to stop thinking about what does the dealer want to do to the consumer and look at it like, what does the consumer want to do at the dealership? That changes everything.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Mike, what would you say to those other GMs, those other large stakeholders at dealerships that are rolling their eyes right now or leaning back in their chair and saying, I hear you, Mike, but that just doesn't work for my store? What would you say to them?
Yeah, stop it. Stop it. One of the silliest things I ever hear, and it happens all the time, is you don't understand our customers. Okay.
Neither do they, right?
Right. I'll pick a state. So New Jersey has people from a different planet. Is that correct? Connecticut's people are, come on. What we're saying is what the statement really means is, what they don't really realize, and I'm going to give you an old statistic in a minute. What the real statement is, I'm afraid I don't know how to handle this. I'm going to lose control, right? When I lose control, I'm going to lose my business. No. When you give an adult the appropriate information, most adults can make really good decisions, and they'll do that. And that's what consumers do every day, multiple times per day. They'll do the same thing in your store. Treat them, give them what they're looking for, help them make a good decision. They'll take advantage of that. And I know I'm sounding a little bit redundant. Your question is really appropriate. So the first thing is, consumers are consumers. I did a study one time with Cox Automotive years ago. We did two consumer studies. One was in San Diego and one was in Atlanta. The results are irrelevant. The fascinating thing to me was the questions from the consumers in San Diego were identical to the questions for the consumers in Atlanta, right? So we've got to get over that. You're just not seeing your customer the way they want to be perceived. Consumers want to consume. Now, I know some transactions are really challenging. We have a very somewhat of a challenging transaction because of structure. I mean, you could get involved in, bad credit, makes things a little bit more challenging. It requires more engagement with the guest. The irony there is digitally managing a guest with poor credit is actually easier because get what you need faster. They're more eager to have that happen. Buying, again, I said it earlier, you get into, I want to buy an F-350. I need specific things. Going to need more guidance. Okay. But they're still consuming. So I don't know. I feel like I'm being redundant. Get over it. Get over yourself. Pay attention to what the consumers want. Give them what they want and get out of the way. We have evidence of that. Sean, we have evidence of that everywhere around us. Why is the auto industry different? I really truly believe in my heart that it's going to get to a point where the consumer is going to become more and more and more intolerant of not getting what they want. Because here's what they can do. Inquiry, whatever it is. If I don't get what I want, moving on. They'll find somebody.
Yeah, it's out there.
Right?
That optionality is out there for customers to meet their demands, right? If you're not willing to, someone else will. They'll find it. And it's so different today because the access is at the end of their fingertips. Like maybe in the past, like it was really difficult to find like what store will do this, what will do that, right? Like now they can pick up a phone. Look, they can ask Chat GPT, right? Like there's so many different ways that like customers get information. And I think to your point, the more we move toward embracing that culture, the better all of us are, right? The better CSI scores are, the better feedback is given to dealers on a quicker way to improve their processes, right? So again, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and it's not because you shouted out our organization 3 times today. So Mike, I know you have a flight to catch here in a moment, but I want to say, as always, in all of our interactions, it's always a pleasure. I thank you so much for taking the time to answer a phone call anytime I call, and thank you for taking 45 minutes today and 20 minutes yesterday to spend some time with us and our audience. So thank you for your time today. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and hope you have a great day, Mike.
Thanks, Keishawn. You're the best. See you.